for the Village of Tinley Park Plan Commission to order. The time is 7:08. This meeting is being conducted pursuant to Governor Pritzker's Disaster Proclamation and Public Act 101-0640, which amends requirements of the Open Meetings Act due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Although remote attendance is an option for the Plan Commission Board, the members are all present here today. However, please note that we do have petitioners and others on the line that are anticipated to call in or have already called in. And right now, we've confirmed before the meeting that the audio is working. So with that, let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, at this time, I'll ask the secretary to take the roll call.
Chairman Gray,
Here.
Commissioner Aitchison, Commissioner Manny,
Here.
Commissioner Gatto, Commissioner Bick,
Here.
Commissioner Gaskell,
Present.
Commissioner West,
Present.
Commissioner Mosquito.
Present.
Okay, we have a quorum present. We'll move on to communications. Staff, are there any communications at this time?
No, there's not.
Okay. Move on to the approval of the minutes. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the May 6, 2021 Plan Commission meeting?
So moved.
Okay, first by
Second.
Commissioner Manny, seconded by Commissioner Gaskell. All those in favor of approving the May 6, 2021 minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the motion carries. We'll move on to the first item of today's meeting. Item number 1 is a workshop to consider recommending that the village board grant Daniel Kelly, on behalf of CenterPoint Integrated Solutions, a variation from section IX.F.1 wall signs business zoning districts of the zoning code to permit a 290.5 square foot wall sign instead of the maximum 120 square feet at 7061 to 7063 159th Street in the B2 Community Shopping Zoning District. This item also includes final site plan and architectural approval. Before staff begins with the overview of this project and a subsequent workshop discussion, I just need to state that I'm going to recuse myself on this item just to avoid any perception of proprietary conflict because the company I work for has done geotech work for Floor & Decor. Thus, I will not be discussing or making any decisions on this item, but I will help move the meeting along. So at this time, staff, if you could please give your presentation.
Thanks, Chairman, and sorry for the technical difficulties for everyone on the line and for everyone here. So I think we got it worked out. Also, the staff report will be made part of the minutes and is available online and attached to the packet online. So this project is for Floor & Decor, and they're proposing to do some site work on an existing site that includes facade work, building work, as well as some site work and site upgrades. And then as part of this, as you stated, they're requesting a variation for signage along with it. So here's the existing site, as you can see, at 7061 and 7063, 159. There's really not a shopping center name to this, but it's next to the old Brementown Mall, which is pretty much all Menards at this point. And then also next and near Brixmore, which is Burlington, Waltz, and the new grocer next to it. So the site was It's actually one of the oldest sites out here, so it actually predates Brementown Mini Mall and everything to the west of it as well. So this was really kind of the first commercial development in this area, and predates most of our current zoning code. It was built in 1971, so this was built as a Kmart. And then it was Kmart until 1996, which is when Kmart had built the new Super Kmart that now Pete's owns, and will actually be coming before you pretty soon for a new building there. So in 1996, they moved from this building to the Super Kmart there. It was vacant for a couple years, and then the current tenants of Burlington and Hobby Lobby moved into this in 1998, and that's when they made some initial improvements. So this was largely all just an asphalted parking lot when Kmart was here, which was kind of typical of 1970. And then as we moved along, we kind of developed additional standards for end islands, landscaping, and things like that. So in 1998, they started to make some kind of minor changes to the site to add in a little bit of landscaping, end islands, to give it some feel that it's not just a complete asphalt parking lot with striping on it. So that's what happened in 1998. They also made some changes to the building to obviously kind of help accommodate two tenants being in it, but besides just the one Kmart tenant that happened before. So the new building is going to be so this is next to the adjacent Tinley Park Plaza or Brixmore Shopping Center that's to the west of it, that just recently came before the Plan Commission for their changes to that site. To the east of this, like I said, is Menards, and that was the previous Brementown Mini Mall. And then you also, on this site, have an existing Burger King outlet that's actually part of the same lot as this. As well as a separate outlet for Midas, which is a separate lot, not part of this parcel. The attached is the 1998 plan that was approved and included, again, some of those end islands that are out there now. It didn't add in every single one, and that's just, we try and bring it closer. Each time we kind of get to these points, bring it a little closer to our current codes, our landscaping codes, and our development codes. Certain times there's limits to that, though. That can either be technical, it can't be done, or sometimes there's some economic limits as well. To really bringing something fully up to code could be fairly costly. So this is where they settled in 1998, just to give it a little bit more direction and not just be an open asphalted lot. I will note that the site was believed to be a planned unit development for many years, so this has come up with a few properties. It happened with the Brixmore one. When that came up, it was thought it was a planned unit development, and we lost the ordinance. We did pretty extensive research to find out that these actually predated our PUD ordinances, and it was actually a mapping error that went back to the 1978 code update. So for 30-plus years, this was thought to be a PUD, and they did make some changes based on that, but there's actually no PUD ordinance there. So some of what's out there, like the Burger King, is actually legal non-conforming. And at some point when they come in, we'll kind of retroactively put a PUD on it if they actually need to make some changes to the property, similar to, again, what we did with the Brixmore Tinley Park Plaza to the west of this. To the west, again, Brixmore is zone B2. To the east of this is the Menards and Brementown Mini Mall, also zone B2, as well as all the outlets to those sites are zone B2. So pretty much this whole corner that's in Tinley Park is zone B2 with similar type commercial uses. To the north of this is Orland Park, which is their biz zoning district, which is, again, kind of most comparable to a B2, B3 zoning in Tinley Park. So everybody's got their own zoning codes. regulations, but it's comparable to those zoning districts in terms of the uses and type of development they're looking for there. We do have a requirement for loading decks that are near residential uses, so we just note on this too that it's more than 500 feet away from a residential zoning district. That would push some limits onto the loading dock, so this is farther than the 300-foot limit that is in place that would then limit their hours of operation on the loading dock. So this is Floor and Decor looking to go into here. They're a national commercial retailer, do mostly flooring, tiling, remodeling products, installation materials. So they operate mostly as kind of a brick and mortar. They do have an online presence, though. You can order stuff online. Some of it can be shipped and some of it can be picked up. You can also call in your orders there. So they do it mostly kind of at their stores. And again, that's just kind of because doing heavy flooring, tiles, things like that can kind of be hard to ship. So this is kind of one of the markets that has stayed. People also like to kind of see what they're going to do if they're remodeling their house and actually see the product. So this is kind of one of the retail sectors that has done relatively well, even with the growth of e-commerce. So they would be going into the former Burlington space, and Burlington is moving from this location over to the Brixmor Tinley Park Plaza next to it into their new remodeled building, and so Floor and Decor would come into here. And most of this is being driven, especially because Floor and Decor has kind of some corporate standards that they follow, at least for the exterior of the building, the sites they go into. So they're looking to make some upgrades, as well as the village has partnered with the property owner to make some other upgrades to really bring this site closer into conformance with our current codes as they make these requests. So they would occupy that full 70,300 square foot space that Burlington's in now. And then Hobby Lobby will continue to occupy the space to the west of this Floor and Decor portion of the building. And the property owner and Hobby Lobby would come forward and may not go back before you guys, but to make some enhancements to their side of the building. So it's a little bit of a two-phase project here. The biggest and kind of most noticeable change out here is going to be the architecture that's on your screen. So it's going from that previous kind of gray and blue looking building, and then they're taking the Floor and Decor portion of this and really trying to enhance the look of it, make it look a little more modern, also try and break up what's a pretty long wall that's out there. And this is kind of one of the most important things to Floor and Decor, is to really try and modernize this, match it with their corporate brand. The proposal does some painting of the facade, as well as some changes to kind of the corners, the architectural elements. I'll call them kind of corner or column elements that run throughout the building and kind of break up that wall. So they've proposed what's in front of you here, and this would mainly just paint and work around the building that's out there now, which is predominantly EFIS, and then they have some block walls as well out there. This would be phase one, and then again, phase two would be more Hobby Lobby. So you may have kind of two separate facades here that aren't going to look exactly alike. And that's fairly typical for these larger tenants. So like in Brixmor, you have Burlington, you have the grocer, that kind of have two separate facades. So when you have large tenants, they kind of get their own treatment. But it's just about how can you do some kind of blending, can you keep some kind of consistent elements across it. So that's what we're going to try and do here, keep some kind of consistent elements if we can. or just create some type of transition that looks a little natural between the two tenant spaces that are out there. So with the open item, number one is just really to review the overall elevations. And then open item two, looking to discuss and review that facade look as well as the phasing of what they're gonna do here. And then staff's recommendation, again, to try and get the petitioner to carry over some kind of design elements, whether it's those columns or the piers that are kind of along the facade, or if it's a color, the band up on top or something like that, to try and keep it a little bit consistent across the two. They are also adding, on the east side of the building, they're adding a customer pickup area. So this is a relatively neglected side of the building. If you've been out there, it's mainly just painted a block that's out there and really hasn't been utilized by Kmart or Burlington. I've never seen anyone really even parked over there, so, but here it'll get a little bit more attention. So because there is kind of large items and they're heavy, sometimes they want to load them into people's vehicles, either by hand or forklifts. So this allows the ability for somebody to drive up there and get it loaded into their car, either outside of it or even drive their car into the building where they can load it there. So they do have some changes happening to that facade as well that makes it a little more inviting, since you will have the public on that side of it. Then the rear facade of this, so they propose to kind of paint that and freshen it up. It's the rear of a commercial building, which is always a challenge to make those look really appealing, and maybe not where you want to put your money. What we're looking to do, though, is as they kind of freshen that up, we're recommending that they paint the whole rear facade and not just the floor and decor portion. Just keep a consistent color there, avoid maintenance issues. So that's our third kind of open item to discuss, is phasing that rear portion of the building in kind of one phase of the work. The site plan and landscape upgrades, I won't go through all of these, but the changes are all kind of shown in the site plan that you guys have in your packet and that I have up here. The general goal here is, again, to bring this closer into conformance when you look at the site changes. So the hope is to really make this a better site out there. If you've driven through it, it's a little awkward if you're going from one of the neighboring shopping centers into this one. There's a little bit different. Stop signs are in different locations. There's kind of a lack of some traffic control that's out there. So what we've tried to do is bring this and kind of mirror what's happening in the other two shopping centers. So as they're all kind of interconnected and have cross access, you can kind of safely traverse through there and not guess if somebody driving into the shopping center is stopping or not stopping, and somebody leaving. It'll make a little more sense going through all those. We've also had them add landscape islands to the ends of the parking stalls, so this kind of keeps for a little bit better drive aisle, not only along the building, but in the main site. And so on the screen is kind of the main drive aisle that's out closer to 159th Street. And then on this one, you can kind of see, again, that main drive aisle kind of closer to the building. They've also realigned some of the drive aisles, so it makes for a little, in front of the building, makes for a smoother transition. If you've been out there, they have a sidewalk that kind of is awkwardly kind of in the drive aisle in front of Hobby Lobby. So this kind of makes some changes there and makes it a little more smooth of a transition, so that way when you're driving through there, it doesn't feel like you're going to drive on top of a walkway. They've added some new landscaping, again, to the end islands, as well as any missing landscaping that's out there. They've also done some crosswalks and, again, done a lot of traffic control work with the striping, entering and leaving the shopping center. And especially at that main kind of first intersection, as you come in from 159th Street. That's a relatively, I've seen quite a few almost accidents kind of at that intersection, just because there's no stop signs going north and south, but then there is going east and west, but that doesn't happen anywhere else in the neighboring shopping centers. So we have them kind of working through this and striping it a little better. So our open item number 4 is just reviewing this overall site plan and then the site upgrades they've shown on here. And then the 5th open item's just kind of our standard practice for engineering purposes. This still needs to go, have some final engineering approvals on it. So we have recommended condition that it's always kind of subject to those final engineering standards. Lighting is proposed to be upgraded throughout the floor and decor portion of the parking lot and then the building. To kind of brighten that up, staff has recommended that the petitioner look at upgrading this throughout the site, give it a consistent look on the building and within the parking lot, have a consistent lighting color and lighting level. We are okay if this maybe goes into a phase situation. And with that phasing that's being proposed, staff's recommending we come up with some level of a deadline. So for us, anytime someone says this will happen in phase 2, we can usually assume phase 2 may not happen. So what we would like to have is some kind of mechanism or a deadline put into these approvals, that we're asking the petitioner for kind of what their time frame is on this, because it is attached to the lease and what Hobby Lobby wants. So they do have a little bit of some work to do on that end to make sure their tenant is okay with everything, and then submit that to us. So we're looking to see if they can come up with that deadline to phase it, and then that avoids a situation where we have differing lights that are out there, or an outdated facade on half of the building and then a modern facade on one half of the building. So staff's supportive of the phasing. We just kind of want to see some set deadline where they actually do need to complete the phase 2 work on it. So from a parking standpoint, the site is short compared to our current codes. Again, this was built in 1970s, well before our kind of current codes came into place. It's actually short around 241 stalls. They're reducing a few stalls that are out there now, but some of those stalls were actually added beyond the approved plan. So they kind of striped some additional stalls along the east side of this that they're removing with the changes for the customer pickup area. And this is, so they're not really required stalls and they weren't part of that approved plan. So they don't need a variance for the parking standpoint. Overall, if you've been out here, there's really not a parking problem, so we didn't have them go through kind of a parking analysis. There's a lot of parking out there. And then Floor and Decor is actually anticipating a lower parking demand than Burlington currently has. So, you know, if it was a grocer or somebody going in there, that maybe would generate a high level of traffic. Maybe we'd ask for a little bit more of a traffic analysis on this. But with what they've got proposed here and kind of 2 known tenants, I think we're comfortable with what they're showing. Lastly is the signage and then their proposed variation for the wall sign. So our code allows 1 square foot of sign per kind of lineal foot of what the tenant frontage has. So if the tenant's got 100 feet of building frontage, then it's allowed 100 square foot sign. But there is a maximum cap to that of 120 square feet. So that is where the sign they proposed actually meets that 1-to-1 ratio. They're proposing a 290.5 square foot sign. They actually have 294 feet of frontage out there, so they're actually meeting the 1-to-1 ratio. What they're not meeting is that overall cap of 120 square feet. So they're asking for a variation from that. It's largely in line with previous approvals, including Burlington, the grocer next door, which have variations for the wall signs, as well as Menards, Aldi, and a lot of the other anchor tenants that usually have a unique facade that kind of fits with the sign that they're working for. So that 120 square foot kind of maximum's usually in there to catch someone doing something that's going to look really awkward out there. But if you can design the facade where it kind of looks within scale, that's where we've entertained variations in the past, and they're requesting here. And that's really also just for visibility purposes. I think if you put a 120 square foot sign out there that far back, you're probably not going to see it from 159th Street. And just with the way they were developed as kind of your suburban 1970s shopping center, that's pretty far back with a lot of parking there. So from a wayfinding perspective, it's good to at least have a sign that you can visibly see. And again, they have over 70,000 square feet they're occupying here. So instead of having two separate tenants that would each have over 100 square feet of signage, they're just proposing one here for their one tenant space. So that's our last open item, which is just to review the wall signage and the variation that they've requested. So that's all I have for this project, so I'll give it to you guys, and I believe we have the petitioners on the phone. So.
Okay, great. So thanks, Dan, for that presentation. The petitioner, if you're on the phone, could you identify yourself, and are you ready and willing to give a presentation or provide comments?
Yeah, hi everyone, this is Parker Lang with Centerpoint. I'm representing Floor & Decor. I'm happy to answer any questions. I think staff did a great job in the overview of the project, but we do have our team here as well as the property owner to address any questions the commission may have.
Okay, excellent, Parker. At this time, I'm going to go to the commissioners, so if they have any questions, hopefully you and your team can answer them. With that, I will move to Commissioner Vick. Any comments or discussions on any of the 7 open items?
No, I just want to say that, yeah, I think the recommended changes are definitely good. The backside of that building, yeah, that I would definitely agree with the staff's recommendation of making sure that for the site owner, you know, to make sure that backside is, the rear facade is definitely painted with the main work that's going on, just to keep everything looking good, because that is kind of a big blank space that you see coming in that way or on that side road, that back road back there. You know, the circulation stuff, yeah, that site is very awkward the way it sits right now. One thing for the owner of the property itself, you know, would be that it should really be looked into that westbound travel on that road. It's been, I don't know how many times that's been fixed out there, but it keeps collapsing every couple months after they fix it. You know, and something, you know, there's definitely something structurally in the ground wrong with that should be looked at some point, you know, but overall, I think the improvements they want to make will definitely help that site out quite a bit and bring it back into, you know, into the, you know, with the modernization of the other parts of the malls over there. And I think it'll be good. The sign variant stuff, I would have no problems with, because yeah, that is a long way from 159th to see that, and you need that bigger size to kind of, you know, direct that a little bit more. But otherwise, I think we're doing good.
Okay, thanks, Commissioner Vick. Commissioner Manny, any comments?
Yes, I think I want to echo Commissioner Vick's, comments. You know, the site does need to have this great change that you guys are proposing. My only comment is that the signage. We're looking at, you know, we're proposing a, 241%, difference between what's our per code. I'm just wondering how the signage would it look if we accept your signage how it is, the building next door, or the tent Hobby Lobby signage, you know? How's that gonna look, you know, the proportions, you know, would it look, you know, odd, you know? And then in the future, if Hobby Lobby tends to, you know, go away, who's moving in? You know, it's just that signage, just that proportion, you know, would that look, you know, strange?
Yeah, and I think the current Hobby Lobby sign actually exceeds the code, and I'm not sure when that was approved or under what codes. I don't really know
Do you know
how
how
it
tall
was
those
approved,
letters
but it
are?
actually does exceed that. If they came back in to replace it, they may need to come back for a variation themselves, and we'd probably keep them along the same lines of if you can stay to that 1-to-1 ratio, or we've increased it to up to 1.5 square feet of signage per lineal foot, so that's
Right.
what actually Burlington got, Aldi got. If they could stay within those ratios, and they can't, they might need to come forward and ask for a sign variance to keep it looking the, kind of the way it is out there. But the current one, I mean, the current Burlington sign is also larger, so
Right.
by doing this, it'll actually keep it proportionate right now.
Okay, then definitely, you know, I think, you know, we have this new facade look, you know, for the floor decor, and then definitely we need to then update, you know, the Hobby Lobby so it could be consistent. I mean, it could be totally different, just to make it look like a different structure, even though it's one. But for sure, we have to, you know, have that, you know, updated as well. And as, Commissioner Vick said, you know, that, you know, the site, you know, the parking site, yeah, it's horrible, so what I see on plans, it's gonna look nice. But that's all my comments.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Manny. Commissioner Gaskell, any comments?
I have no comments.
Okay. Commissioner West, any comments for discussion?
I think it's a great addition to improve some of the traffic flow there. I know navigating that between, you know, coming off of Oak Park Avenue and on and off of 159th can be tricky, so I think that's gonna be a great improvement. I don't have any concerns about the sign. I think it's balanced, given the size of the building and the setback from 159th. That's all.
Okay. Commissioner Lushudo.
Just want to also add that, you know, staff's report was really well done, and, you know, I like how the parking lot and site plan set up, and I do like the cosmetic changes to the building as it is now, so, that's really all I have.
Okay. I want to make a chair's choice to ask if there's any public out there wishing to speak on this item. I see our Mayor Glotz is here in attendance. We appreciate your support. Is there anybody from the public that wants to speak on this item?
And I don't think we got any comments submitted either.
Okay.
So,
Well, with that, Commission, staff, can you please review the open items? And it looks like the commission basically agreed with your direction.
sure, yeah, we'll work with the petitioner to kind of work through those open items. So primarily the rear facade, and then setting kind of, I think, some type of a deadline for that phase 2 work to be completed, so that way we don't have half of a building that looks nice and half an outdated building. So we'll work with them on those kind of those main 2 open items, and the rest of them sounded like you guys were like the overall site plan and look of the building, so.
Okay.
And again, this is just the workshop, so we can
Right.
have the public hearing.
So if Parker Lang is still on the staff with the Counterpoint integrated staff, just make note that there will be a public hearing on this matter at the June 3rd, 2021 regularly scheduled Plan Commission meeting. So Parker, please get with village staff on how to attend. If you're going to attend electronically or via telephone rather, that's perfectly fine. I'm not sure if he's still on the line.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so just make note, June 3rd, 2021. get with staff. It'll move to a public hearing. Thank you,
Thank you, guys.
and good luck.
Great, thank you all.
With that, we'll move on to item 2, which is also a workshop, to consider recommending that the village board grant Chris Carlino, on behalf of Scannell Properties, the contract purchaser, a map amendment, rezoning, and special use permit for a planned unit development, PUD, for 110.94 acres at 19501 to 19701 Harlem Avenue, the northeast corner of Harlem Avenue and Valmer Road. Upon annexation, the parcels are proposed to be zoned ORI PD, Office and Restricted Industrial, Planned Unit Development. The granting of these requests will allow for the lots to be developed with 3 light industrial buildings totaling approximately 1,262,000 square feet in size. This item also includes review of the final plat of re-subdivision for approval by the village board and the final site plan / architectural approval for Phase 1 work. Staff, if you could please make your presentation at this time.
Thanks, Chairman. Just like the last one, I'll just note that the staff report's going to be attached to the minutes as an exhibit, so that way we don't have to repeat everything I'm going to say, and I can save Kathy some time. This is, again, just a workshop. It's a fairly big project, so I think this is important to kind of work through some of the specifics here so you guys really understand it headed into the public hearing, as well as, again, the developer wants to hear any initial feedback you guys might have or questions you might have that maybe it'll take a little bit of time before that public hearing. So kind of a big project here, so I'll take my time working through it, but I'll also try not to drone on too long. So if you guys just get to the end of this, it's a fairly detailed staff report, so if you guys have any questions, we'll get to that fairly quickly here. So what's on the screen now is a rendering of Building 1, and gives you a good idea of kind of where we're headed on this overall. So this is Building 1, how that's going to end up looking on this site, and it is a light industrial property. So the property is actually 2 parcels. It totals 110.94 acres, and it's on the northeast corner of Valmer Road and Harlem Avenue. So this is across from where there's Gas and Wash, BMO Harris, Speedway, the other side of Harlem Avenue, and then it is to the north of the current Amazon distribution center that's under construction, and I don't think you can miss out there because it's 4 stories tall, and you can see it from Target. So it's going to be on the north side of Valmer Road, and you can see that there. The site's currently unincorporated. It's zoned R4 under the county zoning, which is not to be confused with our R4 zoning. We've talked about this a few times recently on rezoning cases here that, every town has a different zoning district. So they might sound the same, they both might be R4, but they could have completely different requirements in them. But that's what it's currently has, that single-family zoning through the county on it. It currently actually has a home on it, as well as a few accessory structures that are vacant out there, and the land has largely been used for agricultural uses over the last 100+ years out there. So, the area here was previously covered by a boundary agreement that the Village of Tinley Park had with Matson that went into effect in 1980. And that designated Valmer Road as kind of the dividing line between Matson and Tinley. Boundary agreements typically use these kind of natural breaks like a road to make just kind of a logical delineations between towns, so that way you don't have towns jumping on opposite sides of the road, and just kind of makes a logical dividing line. You can see this for the most part down 159th Street between Orland and Tinley. One side of the road tends to be Tinley and one's Orland. There's a couple exceptions to that closer over here, like Delta Sonics on the other side, but for the most part that works as the barrier, and that was really the plan here. And that's really to not only create kind of that natural break, but also look at ways the towns plan for their utilities, their bike paths, to know that stuff in the future of where your town's gonna expand to helps you really plan for that. The boundary agreement did expire though in 2000, and Mattson has not agreed to re-up that at any time since then. So currently, it's not covered by that boundary agreement. I just want to kind of bring that into there, that this was kind of the natural dividing line. It was expected to be in Tinley for most of the recent past. The kind of most relevant change that's happened out here is really, again, to the south of the subject property, which is that Amazon distribution center, or the Amazon fulfillment center, that's gonna be, have a heavy amount of robotic usage, and is really 4 stories tall out there. And that's been developed in the village of Mattson, and that was approved in 2019. There was fairly little coordination, almost none, with the village of Tinley Park or any of the surrounding residents. So the village really learned about that almost the same time that the public did, just through news releases. So the comprehensive plan out here really looks at this as a mixed-use PUD, which isn't very descriptive, but generally the thought out here has been that the subject property in this general area of Harlem would be commercial, entertainment, kind of continuing the amphitheater, Odyssey Fun World stuff that was going on. But Amazon has really kind of shifted what's going on out here. And with Amazon right there on Bulmer Road, it really makes this attractive to industrial, light industrial, and distribution developers, and those users who really like to locate around where Amazon is. They obviously do a lot of business, so they kind of attract their kind of ancillary businesses that work with them. The area is actually largely it has a large amount of floodplain on it, and so that is also kind of something that makes it very difficult to develop for a lot of your commercial users or for residential uses. The site also, commercial has largely halted a lot due to Amazon, and just kind of the takeover of e-commerce. So it seems unlikely you're gonna have commercial uses out here, and there really hasn't been interest there. And then just due to the traffic and some of the taxing issues with this property as well, residential really hasn't been attractive either. So at this point, it really wasn't the vision, but with that development of Amazon, at this point, it's kind of where this has pushed us to today. And I think the petitioner maybe will be a little better. They're an industrial developer. This is what they do. So they do spec building and build to suit development. So they might be able to give a little better background, I think, in terms of the market that's really driving this. Especially on the I-80, I-57 corridors, it's very attractive. And this site has really quick access to full access points for both of those expressways. So this has really kind of been a key site that they're excited to develop there. The site, again, has a lot of floodplain on it, especially on the north. There's a creek that is on the property to the east of this. And you can kind of see there, that site is even kind of worse. It's because it has that creek, so it has wetland, floodway, which is really, really difficult and hard to develop. Luckily, this site has largely is mostly floodplain, which is expensive to develop, but you can do it a little bit more by creating comp storage, where you take the floodplain you're developing and kind of move it and retain it on site. But you'll see from the site plan, a lot of what and how they've designed the site is actually driven by that floodplain, because the less they touch it, the more affordable this site is to develop. overall. Here is, again, this is, the petitioner is Scannell Properties, so they do industrial manufacturing. They've done it in over 44 states. This is kind of their bread and butter and what they do. They have a lot of experience, and not only doing spec buildings, but also kind of the build to suit for specific tenants who want to site a very specific way. So they like to do the build to suit because you have a lot more knowns to it. But with industrial developments, a lot of times it's hard to get those tenants locked in if they don't know if a site's gonna start being constructed. So they're really starting with a spec building here, but that's really hopeful that it'll really drive some other development onto the property. Sorry, I skipped over the zoning, but it's largely, to the north of this is B3, it's the Odyssey Fun World and Driving Range. To the west of this is various commercial districts that are largely in the unincorporated and in the county. And the one property that's over there that's in Tinley Park is zoned B3, and that's the Lenny's Gas and Wash. To the east of it is that unincorporated piece of property that's mostly floodplain, and then to the east of that is where Odyssey homes come in townhomes. To the south of this, again, is Matson, which they have a C4 zoning on it, which is that Amazon distribution center. And again, so we have our own consultants, and we work with a consultant called CoStar that does a lot of market analysis, and really there's a lot of, you'll see a lot of this along I-80, 355, I-55, I-57. It's really a booming market with the e-commerce sites to do this kind of development, and even the spec buildings tend to fill up relatively quick. But there is still just a very strong demand out there for this development that isn't going away anytime soon. So just to go over kind of what they're looking for here, they're going to be asking for annexation into the village since it's not in the village now. That's really not what you guys are reviewing. That'll really come from the board in terms of if they want to annex it. What you guys really have a responsibility, and kind of what you're looking for here is this an appropriate zoning? So they're gonna, everything that comes into the village comes in as R1. This developer is obviously not interested in R1 zoning, so they'll be asking for rezoning to an ORI and to have a PUD placed over the property to allow them to kind of do the project that they want to do out there. That ORI zoning is, so the kind of between for this type of use is the ORI, and then, which is office and restricted industrial, and then the M1 zoning, which is general manufacturing. So ORI is largely an office zoning district, but it does allow some kind of internal manufacturing. The goal of it is really to limit any type of negative effects that could possibly be out there. So truck traffic, smells, odors, smoke, exterior storage is really a pretty tight zoning district. M1 is more your general kind of more industrial level sites on that. So the one kind of difference we've run into, they can make ORI work, is really that ORI doesn't allow for distribution, warehouse, wholesaling establishments. But we've liked to use the ORI zoning district because it creates a little more business park type look to these developments. And you don't maybe get as much exterior storage of goods or equipment and things like that. They tend to look a little nicer. So when you think of ORI, that's actually largely what 183rd is zoned, the south side of it. So for the most part, that's kind of what we've done. And for those developments that are along 183rd, those also do allow for warehousing, distribution, and wholesaling uses that they're gonna be asking for as part of the PUD here. So that's kind of actually been the standard practice for the village over the last 30-plus years as ORI, PUD, and then allow for those uses when the site has kind of been correctly designed to handle those uses and any negative effects they might have. The PUD is part of this project, so part of it is again, a planned unit development's really intended to encourage unique development or for a property that's maybe difficult to develop within our current codes, has challenges, maybe it's a phased development, and this really kind of meets all of what the description of a PUD is. So that's within the staff report, and it's really saying why you should consider a PUD. This really meets kind of most if not all of those criteria within the explanation. So it'll provide kind of a consistent development. We can set some consistent standards. There'll be things like shared access points, shared signage, but it'll be phased as well here. So our first open item was really just to discuss that proposed zoning district as well as that proposed PUD that allows for some additional uses that are out there. So getting to the site plan, this is kind of, staff's worked with the developer for a long time to kind of come up with this, and I think we've gone through 12, 13, 14 different iterations trying to get to kind of what's the best site layout that we can get on this. So they've done a good job kind of working with us, trying to find what's the best. A lot of this is driven, one, from the floodplain and the layout of the property, and the other part of it is somewhat market-driven as well. They're not gonna build something that they can't lease, and they want to build something that is kind of the most attractive for businesses. And part of that is the cross-dock situation that you'll see on buildings 2 and 3 that are on the site plan, so the 2 that are for this, on the right side of the image here. And that cross-dock gives a lot more access to that's what their clients, their customers are looking for. So they can maybe, again, that's kind of the bread and butter of the developer, so I can maybe let them talk a little bit more about why that's attractive. Overall here, they're looking for, again, at least a 2-phase development, potentially 3. So the phase 1 is gonna be building 1, as well as some other site items I'll get to. And then the future phases will be buildings 2 and 3, which could be 2 separate buildings, or they're also leaving open the possibility you could just have 1 building that's out there. But they have a couple different options there. Altogether, this amounts to about 1,262 square feet of floor space. So obviously that could go up or down depending on the final approvals for the second phase of this. But over 1.25 million square feet there over those buildings. So what's before you today with the site plan is you're approving conceptually the overall site plan. But phase 2 will come back before you guys for final site plan approval, final architectural approval. But the concept plan is gonna run with the PUD, so if they're largely in conformance with it, that avoids them going back through public hearing process and then village board approvals. So, but they will be at least back before to do site plan and architectural approval. But you guys are doing final approval on what's building 1. So the one on the left side of this, which you're approving the site plan and the architecture of that. Further, with phase 1, you have, and some of this is a little different than what's in the staff report, because, so we had a call today works through some more of the engineering, and they're a little bit further along on that now, working with our village engineer and our consulting engineers to work through this. So there's a couple slight changes that I'll just note from what's on the staff report, and then we'll make sure that's in with the public hearing packet as well. So phase one will include the detention pond that is to the north of that building, one, or on the left side of this image here. It'll include anything that they need to do with the wetland in terms of remediation or plantings, that'll be required out there. Phase one will also include a berm along Harlem Avenue that's gonna run kind of from that detention pond past building one, past where building two is here, and end where you'll see Benton Drive. So this is kind of showing you there what's more in gray on this image that's on the PowerPoint is really what your phase one is, as well as building one, that detention pond. They won't be bringing that berm all the way to Volmer Road in front of building three at this phase. There will be a berm all the way there along Harlem, but just because they don't have kind of a final site layout there for building three, and there could be some engineering issues, they don't want to have to go back through and kind of rebuild a berm that they're going to plant. So for phase one, that berm's really not going to be buffering a view from anything anyways besides an empty field. So that will come back through though when you guys do the final site plan. So the preference was really for that berm there to buffer those views from the truck docks that are there on the west side of the buildings, as well as some trailer storage they have there. We would have preferred to kind of rotate the buildings, keep Harlem Avenue free from truck docks, but it's really tough, again, with that layout of the site. It's a long site going north-south and kind of a little shorter going east-west. So they're trying to really maximize their building footprints, do cross docks within the set layout. This is kind of the best situation we came up with there, but the berm that's gonna be there is gonna be a minimum 3-foot high berm, anywhere where there are truck docks and anywhere where there's trailer storage. So that's mainly building 2 and 3, will be a minimum 3 feet in height, and then you have landscaping on top of that berm. So that'll buffer your views from the trailers on the other side of it, as well as the truck docks. You'll see the top of the building, but you may not even see that, you'll be seeing it through some landscaping, essentially, is what their plan is here. So you'll have trees and shrubs and bushes that'll actually make that berm look even higher. So our open item 2 is, again, just kind of discussing what the overall conceptual plan and phasing is on this site. And again, building 2 and 3 really being mostly conceptual here. The parking lots, the buildings could change, but they want you to have a good idea of kind of what's gonna fit in there, how the access is working, since they're doing the access road as well out to Benton Drive that you can see there. That looks a little awkward to be part of phase one, but that gets them to a lighted intersection. So that's key for obviously trucks to be able to make sure they can get in and out and go any direction they need to go, and not go to one of the 2 other intersections there that may not be lighted. So this is the kind of cut view from that berm, so you can kind of see on the left here is Harlem Avenue starts, and then you'll kind of work through the project, including where there's sidewalks, where the utilities will be, landscape berm, then trailer storage, and then the truck decks. So The open item 3 is just discussing that proposed 3 to 4 foot high landscape berm. That'll actually extend to the north of buildings 2 and 3 too, in front of building 1. It just may not be all the way up to 3 feet. So sometimes there it goes 2 and 3 feet, but it's not buffering any trailer storage or truck docks. But there will still be a landscape berm running that full length where these buildings are. One kind of key aspect to this whole development is water main and utilities. The water main situation out there is kind of unique. We have 2 locations where essentially or one location where it essentially dead ends our water main, and that's through the Odyssey subdivision that's there to the east of this. And our water main runs and loop goes into the Brookside Glen subdivision on the west side of this development. So what this development's gonna do is tie the water main, the 2 water mains together. And on this image, it is shown in kind of purple where the water main is that they would typically run for this development to get the water, and then loop it within the site. What they're gonna additionally do is the red line, that'll take what they would typically do for this development and then tie it into the Odyssey subdivision. So that creates a loop for our entire system. And that really prevents a situation where if there's one of our water lines, especially for Odyssey subdivision, was under construction, before it got to that subdivision, the entire subdivision would have to be cut off from water. With the loop that they're completing here, that won't happen. So a couple homes might lose water or something if they're doing construction, but you won't have the entire subdivision out at one time. And so that's really a public health, public safety concern, to not have those dead ends on the water main, and provides a good backup there. That hasn't ever happened with the Odyssey subdivision that we know of, but it's now going on 30-plus years old. Utilities start to age. That's when you start to get main breaks and maintenance needs. So this is kind of good timing. As that all comes up, they'll have a water main that'll connect through to that site. So
I'd also like to note that because Scanel is the type of developer that they are, and they've done such large projects, it truly is a partnership, and that, but for them kind of coming in and taking this site, the village might not have had this water main become a reality. So it's a very important partnership that when this property develops, that this developer has been very open to listening to the village's concerns and working with us. So can't emphasize enough how this is a critical infrastructure need, and that this developer has really stepped up.
yeah, good point. And I think there's a lot of other developers out there that maybe wouldn't have this view of it and the capacity there. So the village is working with them to kind of complete that overall tie in there for the water. So that's just an open item to discuss that, if you guys have any comments on the overall utility layout that's out there. Truck and vehicle access. So there are some roadway improvements happening out there now, if you've been out there to Vollmer and Harlem, that are largely being driven by Amazon. And that includes some of the intersection widening, adding of turn lanes, and adding of a signal on Vollmer for Amazon that'll be directly adjacent to this site. So they'll also be doing some of that work here. And they've gotten ahead on IDOT, trying to make sure that their plan is also being worked into the work that's going out there as best as they can, working with IDOT, who owns Harlem Avenue and controls Harlem, and then the Cook County Highway Department, which controls Vollmer Road. So got a couple different jurisdictions to coordinate through there, but the good news with everything happening with Amazon, they're hopefully tying their project into that as well. The traffic flow largely is also being driven on their site through using the existing lighted intersections that they know will be there. So the Amazon one on Balmer, that they're gonna use as kind of a main access point, and then there's a light on Benton Drive. That's the further south one that's on the image here. So those are kind of the two known access points that's also driving how this is laid out. They have gone, actually that's an error word, so the second one down says right in, right out. That one's actually potentially proposed for a full access point there, not right in, right out. But their petitioner is also gonna be working with IDOT to try and get a signal at that intersection. And I think that's important for them. They'd love to have that, because that works to have building one then kind of have a lighted intersection right there. I think it's also a good thing to have for the residents to the west of this that are in the Brookside Glen subdivision that can then have an easier way to leave. It's fairly hard to make a left out there now on Harlem, or make cross turns across Harlem. So they're going to be tying that into their permits with IDOT to try and request that. There's no guarantee of that being approved just because of the way the lights are out there. You have that light at Benton Drive, you have the light at Balmer Road to the south, and then to the north you have one at Oak Park Avenue. So there's a lot of lights out there, and sometimes it takes that they have some requirements for those spacings, how they work. But they're working with us as well to kind of see if we can make this meet whatever IDOT's requirements are, and if you can kind of tie all those signals together, you can make it work pretty well out there, so.
And again, this is another comment that came out with our village engineers and looking at the area as a whole, and the village would be looking to partner with the developer as well. Some of you may have been around, some of you weren't, but when the Lenny's gas station came into our community, we heard time and time again that there's the inability to get out of the subdivision there on the West Side Road is becoming more and more difficult. So again, in partnership with the developer, we'd like to push or pursue IDOT to consider another intersection here. And ultimately, it is their decision with IDOT, but again, in partnership with the developer, we'd like to pursue that. We think that the residents would greatly appreciate that. And again, this development will be ultimately adding some additional traffic, not solely the reason why a light would be needed, but it's an opportunity to improve an area. So.
Thanks for that. I won't go through the rest of kind of the traffic study. I think it's 150 pages. It works. We've had our traffic consultants take a look at it and make sure that the numbers they're using, the data they're using, makes sense, and generally agree. Our consultants agree with their consultants' approval, and kind of summary that there is capacity out there. It's actually a benefit that these are kind of two major roadways that are out there that can handle this type of traffic. If this was somewhere else where you didn't have a major county highway and a major state thoroughfare, maybe it wouldn't, but it's been designed for some of this capacity already. And then the improvements they're making out there now, allowing this area to flow a little better. So overall, I'll just note that it should, everything's expected to work out there, and they've done some studying of that and how it'll work. So that's open item 5 is just talking about the phase-in, or the overall site circulation as well as the site circulation for phase 1. So the kind of the third thing I'll say that the developers really kind of gone out of their way with and listened to us and the village's concerns has been that this area for emergency communications isn't the best. So we heard from police, fire, and dispatch that this is kind of, it gets signals, but it can be a little fuzzy, and for public safety purposes, you don't want fuzzy when you're talking with a dispatcher. So This has really kind of been on our public works radar too, to get some kind of other tower out here that they need for those radio signals. So, the developer has a little bit of land out there that they're able to, work with us and are essentially gonna donate to the village as part of this, break it out as a separate lot, that the village can then use for a radio tower. So instead of us going through a process of trying to obtain a property out there, when in reality, we don't need a lot of space, just a site that's kind of localized out there. So this will benefit their development. Their development wouldn't make basically that any worse that's out there, but by them donating this, it'll kind of fix an existing problem we have out there. And make sure we can get some good communications in. The tower's gonna have cross-access through their site, so there may be kind of some temporary access to it for construction, and then as it develops, we'll make sure there's kind of a roadway with those final plans, that go to that tower site, so we can maintain it, build it, and again, have better access out there. The sidewalks and paths, so this has changed a little bit as well, from what's in the staff report. So along Harlem Avenue, they're planning to do an 8-foot wide multi-purpose path that'll run there. The hope is that'll tie into the north, where there's some plans to hopefully have connections along Oak Park Avenue, by the amphitheater, and really start to tie in our entertainment districts, our downtown, and everything along there. So you'll have a path that people can actually walk on after concerts, to concert, to the Odyssey Golf Club. For the time being, it might float out here, but this is a fairly large development where we think this is really needed to go in there. So the developers put an 8-foot wide multi-purpose path in there at the request of our Public Works Department, and that will extend from the north side of this development all the way to Harlem Avenue. There is a walkway required around at Vollmer Road as well. That one's a little bit, it may never tie into anything, or it may be able to tie into the Odyssey subdivision. So they're showing it on the plans. They're looking to do it. We are leaving it somewhat open that if our village engineers determine we can't ever connect it into the Odyssey subdivision, then it may not make sense at that location. So within their site as well, I'll say the buildings themselves will tie into that walkway, so you'll be able to have employees that can bike or walk to work, actually get there. And so a lot of that was kind of with the overall concept plan on what they're trying to do here. There is final approval, though, is what you guys are going to be reviewing for Building 1. So the staff report dives a little deeper into that Building 1 in terms of what the layout is, parking, truck dock situations. So Building 1's approximately 195,000 square feet. It has 125 parking stalls that are on the north side of the building, 24 docks on the south side, 50 trailers, storage locations. So kind of your pretty basic industrial building out there. The building's set back about 63 feet from the property line to the west, and then would have that berm. I think the staff report says 3 to 4 foot high, but that's where it may actually drop down to be more around the 2.5 range. Because on this building, you're not really, you don't have those immediately adjacent docks or trailer storage. So you'll still have a good landscaping buffer, landscape berm there. It just may be a little shorter than the 3 to 4 feet. It'll happen where there's trailer storage. Just like with our other one, the open item's always the engineering comments, and this one has a lot of engineering associated with it, and they've done, I'll say the petitioner and developer has done a really good job going pretty far with their engineering compared to a lot of the projects that come before you guys. So typically, we just kind of get some preliminary engineering that shows, yes, you can build this. They've really gone a lot farther than that because of the floodplain, because of the extent of this site and how big it is. They really needed to make sure that they wanted to go a step further, and it makes us feel a little more comfortable doing these plans as well. With that being said, they're still working through some of kind of the final engineering comments, so it's pretty far along. We know stormwater can work, we know the comp storage for the floodplain can work. They just need to kind of clean up some details on that. It also has to go through MWRD, IDOT, Cook County, IEPA, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is looking at it because there's some wetlands in there. So I think there's more than that on the list as well. So they have a lot of other jurisdictional approvals that are required before they get any building permit. So we just recommend a condition on that to clarify. We have some engineering items that'll clean up. But I think our engineers are fairly confident what's before you today can work, and will be successful. Parking, with anything, we always say, this is a little more of an art than a science when you're talking about parking. With our zoning ordinance, it actually really works for warehouse and distribution uses is more tied to how many employees you'd have, which is great, except for when you're building a spec building, you don't know who those tenants are gonna be. It also really doesn't work even if you know the user, because that could change in 10, 20, 30 years, and you're gonna have a different user there. So it's great, that'd be a great way to plan, but you don't have a set number of employees the entire time. So staff and the developer and our consulting engineers have kind of looked to some other places other than our own zoning code, which again, written in 1978, doesn't really give us the greatest guidance. So we looked at some other standards to kind of see what's kind of a typical range, maybe more tied to square footage. And it doesn't help because it's a little bit all over the place too, because it really is tied to the users that go into these sites. They range from anywhere for like one space per 800 square feet to one space to 2,000 square feet. So that actually is pretty huge. It's the difference of more than double of the parking spaces you could have on a site. So we did do a little bit of a breakdown based on 1 per 1,000 square feet and 1 per 2,000 square feet, as well as give you kind of an idea of how many stalls per 1,000 square feet there are. I'll say we talked to another completely separate industrial developer today who actually said around 0.8 stalls per 1,000 square feet is generally what they do. So this falls right in line with what Scanell Properties is proposing on this site and what they feel comfortable with. Again, without any prompting, we heard that again today from a different developer who does industrial properties. So that's good to hear that they're falling kind of right in line with what's the standard practice. One of the key things here is you're just approving phase 1, building 1. So phase 1 it's a good thing. It's the smallest building, so it's 195,000 square feet. So it's got the most amount of wiggle room there compared to the larger buildings. It also gives you a chance, if there was some major parking issue with the future phases, to be able to correct that. So spec 1 is the most unknown, so they are doing that on spec. Where phase 2, buildings 2 and 3, the preference for the developer is really to have tenants build to suit those with specific tenants in mind. So with those future phases, I think parking will be a little easier to work through. We did do a little bit of an analysis based on what they're showing on the concept plan. Because that's meant to be a realistic concept. But those will be a little more specific to those tenants when they come forward for final approval. So we did build in with the PUD though, some wiggle room to make sure they don't have to go back through a variation process. If they comply with whatever whatever the approved site plans are. So it'll come before you guys for a review of the parking at that time, and if it works, they'll be able to move forward with it. So that's our 8th open item, which is a review of the parking overall, and then predominantly really for phase 1 on the site. From a site buffering perspective, this doesn't really meet our full landscape ordinance, which is really designed mostly, I would say, for commercial developments, or smaller commercial developments. It really doesn't apply very well to infill sites, which we've seen, when those have come before you guys, or for really large developments, something like this, for an industrial development. Because trees and curbs and landscape islands don't really mix with trucks very well. So we have kind of worked to try and meet the intent of the code, which is to bring good landscaping, quality landscaping, make an attractive site. And then also too, to kind of buffer any negative effects. So we've really kind of focused a lot of that landscaping on perimeter landscaping. And then that buffer along Harlem to really make an attractive presence along Harlem Avenue, which has the most traffic, obviously, out here. So that buffer from Harlem was key, and then the other focus was to make sure that we have Odyssey to the east of this. We have that subdivision to really make sure we can buffer as much as possible, make sure there's not anything that's gonna be extremely visible or harm those residents that live there now. And it's pretty far away though. So from a distance, just a pure distance standpoint, there's 1,300 square feet between the property lines. There'll be 1,500 square feet between the nearest homes. Lineal feet, 1,500 feet between the homes and then the parking. And then over 1,700 square feet between the homes and then the nearest building. So that's quite a distance away. It's not just distance though, so you have a couple different buffers that are built into that. You have the one that's up against the homes, and up against the Odyssey Country Club. Then you have kind of the naturalized buffer of the creek that runs through there, that's pretty heavily wooded. And you can kind of see an image of that there. It's pretty big out there. When you're looking at the site plan, it kind of makes it seem a little smaller than it is, but it's a pretty massive site out there. So it's got a pretty big naturalized buffer there. And then you'll also have a buffer again on this site that'll be up against the development. So you really have kind of 3 separations of naturalized landscape buffers between the nearest homes and then this property. So that's really there it's to buffer any type of views of the trucks or the docks. Not that you might not see the buildings in the distance, but there really shouldn't be any negative effects with the way they've designed this. So the 9th open item is really the overall kind of landscape plan review, which again, there's a full breakdown kind of in your packet of what that landscape plan is. It's pretty large. It even breaks the site into different chunks. I'll just point out that there is, within the site, you have the detention ponds that are proposed through it, and then also the wetland development. So there is gonna be kind of some naturalized plantings along that, which is good it's low maintenance, so you're not cutting a very large field all the time. But it's also good for the environment. It's good for bugs and critters and good for stormwater management runoff. So there's a lot of benefits of that, and that'll be kind of that more naturalized area that you see on the north side of the site and then on the east side of the site. So there's a full landscape buffer around the development, but then there's some pretty large areas that'll be kind of a prairie, naturalized prairie plantings out there. From a lighting standpoint, the entire project meets our proposed or our required lighting levels, which are 0.5 foot candles at all of the property lines. It's below. All the light fixtures are downcast, full cutoff, so you can't see the lenses. They're not tilted out, so you don't get any glare from any of the roadways. And those are about 25 feet in height. Staff's just recommending that throughout this phase development, they use the same lighting, kind of like what we wanted to see at Floor & Decor. I think you get a consistent lighting level. The appearance looks better too if you just kind of use the same poles, the same fixtures on the buildings and on the poles. So, there is lighting that the petitioner is looking into on Volder Road and Harlem Avenue. Those will be subject to the jurisdictional approvals though. So if it'll be up to IDOT and up to Cook County if they put street lights on those. Sometimes it's not beneficial and there can be weird situations if you have it at one half of the road and not the other half. So that's why it's kind of up to them. But there will be lighting at kind of all the main access points, so that anywhere where there's a driveway, you have those illuminated, but maybe not on the street. Again, up to IDOT and Cook County. Architecturally, it's an industrial building, so it kind of is what it is for the phase one. But I think they do a good job of kind of scaling here. And breaking up what could be a very long monotonous facade. They use some kind of techniques, coloring, scoring, things like that to help kind of break up the facade here. So the phase one approval is up here on the board, and I think that gives you a good idea of what they do overall. So that's an open item to just kind of review and approve that final phase one. Also, for the overall development, we'd like to see, we don't really want we don't want the same building maybe repeated 3 times. I've seen that in industrial parks. It makes it look like one industrial park, but when you get this much building, you want to break it up a little bit. But we are looking to see if they could keep some consistency or some standard stuff carried over through the site, so it does look like it's one development site. I don't think we need some separate set of architectural standards for this PUD. But for a lot of you guys who are on the board when we adopted our current architectural standards, and I think those do a good job already of saying, you know, how it's supposed to tie into the surrounding development, surrounding properties that are out there. So I think they do an overall good job here with building one, which is really the only one you're doing a final review on. So. And they add in, I'll say they do kind of key corner elements there. There's also one in the center that kind of function as main entrances, but really help give it almost more of an office look compared to an industrial look. So, and that makes that front facade that'll be the most visible along Harlem, as well as then the 2 sides of it look fairly attractive. The south elevation, which is the truck dock situation, there's only so much you can do there when you have truck docks, but they do tie kind of some consistent elements around that side as well, and make it look attractive. Signage is left a little open here, so the PUD allowances that you'll see in your staff report, we've allowed for off-site signage between all of these properties, so it won't be some business somewhere else in the village, but anyone here can be on other signs. So the developer can coordinate directional signage, ground signage, the way they want. And otherwise, any type of wall signage, anything like that would need to be in compliance with the village codes. Otherwise, they'd have to come back before for some kind of request there for signage. But overall, we've built in some flexibility there with the ground to allow some additional ground signs at the entrances that normally wouldn't be permitted, and then allow that off-site signage. And I think that's largely it. We kind of list out what's different with this development from what our typical zoning code allows, but not to make that look too daunting. It is, again, why they're requesting the PUD is to have, this is a unique development. There's a lot of moving parts. So they've done some things a little different than what our zoning code entails, but they've also gone above and beyond in other areas. So we've just left that as an open item to discuss those kind of overall PUD, what they're planning to do out here. Lastly is just the final plat approval, and that may change a little bit from what was in your packets today. We did have some discussion with them today on how that would change with cross-access, but that final plat is gonna have cross-access, utility easements, pathway easements, landscaping easements, and then the overall lot layouts out here. So what's before you today will change a little bit, but it generally is still gonna accomplish all of those things. And that's, I believe, it for the staff report. So.
Okay, well done, Dan. It's a marathon. With that, I'd like to invite the petitioner or anyone on the petitioner's team to make a presentation if they so choose. Please identify yourself and then what position you have on the team.
Sure. My name is Dan Harrington. I'm with Scannell Properties. I'm the development manager in charge of getting this project entitled and built and get some tenants in there in Tinley Park. And, you know, we're a national developer. We've touched now, I think, 49 states. I think we've added some states since that statistic was published. And we did over $2 billion worth of revenue last year. So we're an experienced industrial developer. We work all across the country. As Dan said, we've seen recently the way people are shopping and the way retail is now with online shopping. It's created a huge demand in our industry. We're excited about this site in particular because of its great access to two major highways and it has the surrounding infrastructure that can get us there. So we're really excited about the site, as well as it offers us the opportunity to do both cross-dock and single-sided buildings. So we feel like it's a nice mix that should attract a diverse group of tenants to your city. And I think we've worked closely with staff and tried to incorporate a lot of the comments, and it's been a pleasure working with you guys to get us to this point and incorporate some of the things that you guys have requested. So I think we've had a really good relationship with Tinley Park thus far, and we really look forward to doing a project here. So if you have any specific questions, I think Dan covered all the minute details. I could never go into. I don't think there's anything I could add. So if you have any specific questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Okay. Well, I'm going to open it up to our commissioners. If they have any comments, no need to stand up. I'm sure it'll be kind of long. You can just approach. And is there anybody on the phone that wants to speak as well? I just want to open that up while there's
I think it's just the developer's team. So if
Dan,
one of them is needed,
okay,
I think he can.
fair enough. So Dan,
direct.
you're a point guy, and if you need to, pick on one of your team members, that's quite all right. With that, I'm going to open it up for any discussions and comments, beginning with Commissioner Lasciuto.
Yeah, I have one comment and then a couple of questions. So, I mean, the first comment I'd like to make is, that, I like the overall site plan of the development. And And I think it's great that the developer's working with the village to improve the village's infrastructure, especially the water main and the radar, the tower and everything. I think that's great. Two questions I have is, with regards to the first building, I know it's not built to any specific renter, but I guess who would be the target, I guess, for renters to come into that property? I guess what type of renters is the developer looking at? I know they said they have diverse group of companies or whatnot, but what type of industry, I guess, is this?
Sure, it's, with the smaller building, it could be probably a greater mix than maybe what you'd find in some of the larger buildings. I think the larger buildings are gonna be fully racked, warehousing, distribution, kind of your standard, less office space, fewer employees per square foot, and just a lot of product moving in and out. What we see in some of the smaller buildings is a little bit more office component in the front. You have usually we have all, in this case, we have all the parking in the front of the building, and the dock in the back, and they tend to build more office space. There usually is a warehousing component. Sometimes there's some light assembly, some machining, tenants like that. Sometimes you get some more technology type tenants. It's just typically users that don't quite have the need for the storage, but maybe doing something else in the back warehouse area. We typically have a slightly lower clear height than those buildings because they don't tend to store high like they do in the larger buildings. So does that answer your question?
And then, secondly, I know this is phase one, so I guess my question would be, when would the developer be looking to start phase two? So is it when phase one is occupied, or is it when phase one is complete and still maybe unoccupied?
I think worst case is it starts when building one gets occupied or some level thereof. I would see us probably being a little bit more aggressive just because of the fact that there are two different buildings, attracting two different types of users. I could see us bringing the second building sooner, much sooner than that, potentially even starting that building before the first one's complete. But we're still under discussions on how we want to handle that at this point. But we feel really good about this market. I could see us being very aggressive with that.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Wishudo. Commissioner West.
Yeah, I do have a quick question based on are you seeing the same thing?
Yep,
Okay.
yep.
The yellow is essentially gonna remain undisturbed, correct?
Yes.
Okay. There was a reference to the final landscaping plan, and I know some of that's dependent, but given the sensitivities of the floodplain and the creek running through the adjacent lot, I just wanted to make sure I was understanding that correctly. And then is the sidewalk that's built in along Harlem, that is part of the final plan? Like that will be there no matter how this develops? Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, that's part of phase.
Okay, part of phase one, great, just wanted to make sure.
Will be Harlow.
Okay, fantastic.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner West. Commissioner Gaskell.
I have no questions.
Okay. Commissioner Manny.
The only comments I have, I think this development is going to be great for Tinley, and I appreciate the partnership that development and Tinley Park has, and that's something that we, that's great, for us to make things, easier, streamlined. And then the architecture, I think I like the how it looks, ORI, right now, manufactured looks, something, attractive, like Dan said.
Yeah, and to Dan's point, we would anticipate, creating some architecture that ties the buildings together, but also making them a little bit diverse so they're not all the same building.
Right. That's all my comments.
Okay, excellent. Commissioner Vick.
I just wanted to, once again, I think the site plan for this is a really good, use of the property with all the challenges of this property, especially on the north end, of it. I think it works out, it would work out to be pretty good. One thing I do appreciate on staff's part and the developer part, is with the buffering that's going on with these properties from both the residential and even Harlem Avenue. and beyond Harlem Avenue just because of the size of the project. I think it'll be, I think it's good because there's a lot of these developments like this out there that don't have this kind of buffering out there. And I think it really stands apart from that stuff, which is good for everybody within the community and going through it. In working with the village on this stuff, I mean, this does solve a problem. I said with the water main, it does kind of solve a problem that's been in existence for a while. And I would definitely agree, yeah, the radio communication stuff in that end is definitely a little sketchy at times. So having a tower out there is a great adjustment. And working with the village on that, I would definitely say, you know, that's pretty awesome here. Overall, though, yeah, I mean, it's a good plan. It'll help to tie everything together. You know, the additional light at, what is that, 194th or 195th, whatever that is, right there, you know, that would be huge, I think, for everything in general. You know, yeah, you get stoplight after stoplight after stoplight, but it's for the development, for the residents on the west side and Brookside Glen, yeah, that did have those concerns, like you were saying, Dan, with Lenny's over there. Just makes everything a lot safer having that there. You know, and with the technology of the intersections these days, you know, you don't always have to worry about it changing for no reason, especially in off hours, you know. So I think that'd be really good. Hopefully IDOT does come across with that, those approvals and stuff. So overall, this would be a good, definitely addition to the village here with all this. I don't really have any questions about it.
Okay, thanks, Commissioner Vick. Dan, I do have some comments. First off, kudos to Scannell Properties for improving the community with the looping of the water main, the emergency tower. Talk about being a good neighbor. I like to hear stuff like that. Corporate social responsibility, I guess, is a big phrase they bandy around, but I do appreciate putting, you know, your money where your mouth is. That really helps build up the community. Going into some of my comments for staff for the open items, I do believe it does fit an ORI zoning district with the PUD approval. I think this will, I know it's a spec build, but I do believe, as you mentioned, you know, the commerce is going down, so light industrial is probably where it's at. With that, the landscape berm, great to screen with the 3 to 4 on the side that buffers Harlem, the west side, and I understand it's 2.5 on building 1. My only question, a clarification for that is, Dan, you mentioned that berm is going to be built on from north to south, but the south won't, right? Which makes sense on Volmer. Is that right? Or it's not going to just be built for building 1, right? The west berm?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, the berm along Harlem will go that whole way from building 1 all the way to building 3.
When phase 1 is constructed?
It'll just be up, phase 1 will just be up to the Benton Drive.
Okay, that's fine. I just want to make sure. That's what I thought you were saying before, but that will be the 2.5, right?
2.5 will just be where building
1 is, and then it'll increase, okay,
And
because I
then
know
with
it's,
building 2, it'll increase to the 3 to 4 feet in
Okay.
height, and then building 3 will also be 3 to 4 feet in height when they build that with phase 2.
okay. And I mean, I agree with the screening, you know, I know the docks are facing the road, but with the buffer on top of a berm, I think that's taken care of. And as some of the commissioners have already echoed, you know, you do have sufficient buffering to the east as well. Precast panels, one of our commissioners already mentioned, the building looks fine, so, you know, I think staff report mentioned in the M1, you wouldn't need brick, but you already said, Dan, that you're not gonna make it, you know, identical building, so as long as you use different colors, I mean, or same colors, same geometry, but, you know, different look, it sounds like we're in agreement with that. I do like that multi-purpose path that one of our commissioners mentioned. I really hope it, you know, fingers crossed, it will be able to connect, because I think it really does make walks and bike rides more enjoyable for the residents of Tinley Park. I do want some clarification on the, I was looking at the plans, Manhard's plans on the floodplains. Now, my understanding is, there's a little bit of floodplain on that north portion of the property, building 1, the parking lot, and a little bit of that north part of building 2, but that's all gonna get redirected to compensatory storage, right? I just want to make sure
Yeah, and if you, because I think I didn't entirely accurately answer the question that was asked to me before. If I could let Kevin maybe
Oh,
talk
sure,
a little
sure,
bit
absolutely.
about that
Yeah,
floodplain
absolutely.
and how we're doing the compensatory storage, just so I'm clear on that topic.
Okay, sure. Kevin?
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Kevin Coughlin with Manhard Consulting. We're the civil engineers, surveyors, landscape architects on the project. And yeah, the comment regarding the yellow areas, those areas would be regraded. For the most part, we're staying out of the floodway, which is the conveyance channel, but the floodplain, which is the area that backs up in the high storms, would be regraded, reconfigured, and also improved. So we would go back in with wetland plantings, sustainable plantings, prairie, low maintenance, and improve what's out there. Today is agricultural planting, so there'd be deeper rooted vegetation. Like Dan had discussed, there'd be the landscape buffer with trees, and then beyond there would be more of your restored wetland area.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. And then regarding the floodplain, so the existing floodplain is further west and is actually exists where the east side of Building 1 is today.
Yeah.
So part of the opportunity with looking at the site as a whole is we were able to take the floodplain that juts out
Yeah.
in this area and provide compensatory storage and widen the creek channel, really where it's better located from an ecological standpoint. So this is floodplain compensatory storage on this strip. And then you come along, there's floodway, and then the green is the stormwater detention basin.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you, Kevin. You answered my questions. Perfect. Thank you.
Sure.
And Dan, just a comment. You mentioned too that the ratio for square footage, because these are huge buildings, the ratio for employee in square footage is going to be very low. So I was just curious. I like the overall site layout. My question, I know it says truck traffic and cars will be separated, however, they will use the same entrances and exits to the site. And I just want to get I know it's hard since it's a spec building in terms of not knowing the tenant right now, but I just want to get an idea of is there a ballpark ratio of truck traffic to employee traffic that are going to be mixed at those exits per se? Because not knowing who's going to be there, you don't know exactly their intervals either. So
That is tough for me to probably speak to the quantity of truck traffic. I would say in terms of parking and in terms of employees, on the smaller building, we're shooting for around 1 per 1,000 parking stalls, so a little bit higher employee ratio there. As the buildings get larger, we start to look at 1 per 1,500, 1 per 2,000. So, we try to build our road network such that it keeps cars from going through truck docks, because that's not a good situation to be in. So we've added some circulation, some ways for cars to get around such that they're sharing the road with trucks, but they won't be going through the truck docks, because that can be a dangerous situation. Do you want to speak to?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
okay, excellent.
Yeah, as far as the mix and peak times, we do have KLOA, a traffic engineer on the project, who's looked at the mix.
Yeah.
And the autos, you'll generally see during the commute times in the morning and near the end of the day, whereas the trucks are typically intermittent. You'll see a few at a time. So they do offset to a certain extent, but the design case is really those rush hour
Right.
times that we've looked at and accommodated from a stacking and circulation standpoint.
Yeah. And I know KLOA's report is very extensive, as you mentioned, Dan, about 150 plus pages there. I do have another question, perhaps, Kevin, you'd be able to add clarification on. And this is just from an observational standpoint of when I go down Harlem going south, there's always and they're doing a lot of work on Alma right now as well. as well as Harlem, but there's a lot of traffic that backs up in that left-hand turn lane going south on Harlem at that Volmer Road intersection where you turn left and go east. And I concur with staff. I know the village engineer looked at KLOA's analysis, which is extensive. I'm just curious, with more trucks and, that's all of a sudden a bigger length. Can you
Yeah.
speak to how the traffic pattern will look there, or?
In generalities, I know KLOA also is working on the Amazon across the street and is accounted for those flows
Okay.
in this analysis also. And and also done counts during peak hours to monitor and see those, track and collect data for those same types of events. And has found that there are some improvements. We're doing decel lanes, new left turn lanes at the 2 new access points. But with those improvements, has found that the highways operate at an acceptable level of service. As far as getting more detailed into queuing lengths and stacking, I'd have to defer to the traffic engineer, but I do know that it's been discussed with the team and that the current infrastructure does support those two projects plus the existing flow. I know
Okay, no, and.
we're in a
and-
Chicago suburb, so it's
Yeah.
never gonna be perfect.
Right.
And there are gonna be, some situations to look at, but it has been looked at pretty closely and deemed to be still at an acceptable
Of
level.
course, and I'm just going on an observational thing, and they've got the road already kind of, torn up a little bit on the Volmer side, and also some traffic.
I know we'll be looking at signal timing for the new lights to try to optimize the flow and try to avoid any of those bottlenecks
Yeah.
possible.
Okay,
And timing of the day may matter too, like, so if you're talking about people turning on the Volmer, if you went later in the evening at, rush hour, I could see that being
Yeah.
people going home from getting off at 80, where maybe that's not where you're gonna have as much trucks, but you have more cars and vice versa. There's gonna be times where you have more trucks, but then the cars are not, so, obviously influenced by time of day.
Right, fair
I will
point.
say they did work internal, as you were talking about, kind of with the vehicles and the truck traffic. We did work through a lot on kind of, to make sure there's enough stacking,
Yeah.
really along where those access points are at, so that way you have enough stacking space there for trucks, cars, and where cars are gonna turn out, have enough space to make sure they turn out, and there's not always gonna be a truck right there. So we worked through a lot of that with our village engineer and their staff, to really kind of adjust those access points, which is why they don't come out right where the intersection is. Some of them make some jogs, to really allow for some extra stacking through there for trucks, and so vehicles can get out of their parking lots as well.
Okay.
I was just gonna say, the adjustments were generally increasing the throat lengths to beyond a lot of the typical IDOT rules of thumb, I'll say. There's not as much in black and white. And also wanted to mention, we're about 8 weeks in on submittals for IDOT and Cook County DOT. We're certainly gonna review and look at all those impacts to the surrounding roadways. We hope to have heard something by now.
Oh, yeah,
But
yeah.
we should be hearing something any day, we think, but it'll be well coordinated with those two agencies.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. I appreciate it.
Sure.
One of the last things I want to mention is I do agree with staff about if you need to tweak parking, you'll have that opportunity. It does sound, based on what Dan had commented on, that you may be already in phase 2 before phase 1 is done, which I think is fine. You would probably know who the tenant would be by that time, right?
Potentially.
Okay.
Yep.
So something like that, you would want to at least kind of have some fluid adjustments. And I know you wouldn't have 100% accurate data at that time, but I do like the fact that you mentioned if there is something on phase 1 that's a little bit short, you'll be able to adjust phase 2, phase 3.
And
And
like we
that's
said
with the
with,
understanding it's a spec building, so right now it's kind of a black box, right? In terms of who's the tenant.
Like we've said with our other ones, it somewhat is the developer, if they don't have enough parking for somebody, they're not gonna locate at this building. So to some degree, it's a driver of who's gonna go there. Vehicles aren't gonna park along Harlem Avenue. They can't have them parking off-site. So somewhat, the parking can be limiting to who their tenants are to be on here. And that's up to the developer to feel comfortable with what they're proposing, so.
And the tenant,
And the
tenants
tenant,
they're very detailed and making sure that the site works for them.
Yeah, so we've had that with multi-tenant shopping centers too, where if everyone was a restaurant, it would never work,
Yeah.
most shopping centers, that would never work. So
You're
it's
gonna look
up
for
to
the right
owner
fit,
to-
yeah.
To decide how that tenant mix is gonna work, so.
Well, the last thing I have to say is kudos to the Tinley Park staff for listening to the community. Kimberly, you mentioned past meetings when they were doing the Lenny's food and fuel about that stoplight, and then keeping that in your memory, and then taking the opportunity again with what I feel is a good neighbor in terms of the developer and hopefully leveraging that to IDOT to, hey, can we revisit this and get another intersection or signalization changes or something. So kudos to that foresight, and it's well appreciated, Kimberly. With that, I do not have any more comments. So, Dan, is there any more comments that your team wishes to? Okay. At this time, staff, if you want to, I guess, review the open items and some of the directions.
Yeah, I won't go through them all. I think we got some good direction from you guys, and I think we'll work back with the developer and the petitioner to work through those based on your comments. And then public hearing for this is June 3rd. So, thank you.
Okay. So, going on to the go to the order. If you're not going to review the open items?
No, I'm not gonna work back through each one of those.
No. Okay.
We'll just,
All right.
I think I have some good feedback here. We can work with it.
Okay, fair enough. I wasn't asking point by point, okay. So with that, we will, as Dan mentioned to Dan, there will be a public hearing on it on June 3rd, 2021, at the regularly scheduled Plan Commission meeting. So Dan, get with staff on how your team can attend, either via telephone or in person like you are here today. So thanks again, gentlemen, for your time, and thanks for looking at Tinley Park as a potential place to do business. At that, I'll move on to the good of the order. Staff, do you have anything to present for the good of the order?
I'll say we have our new planner, Lori, got appointed on Tuesday, so her start date's on Monday, right? Kimberly might have more to add to that, but I'm excited for her to come, so really sad to see Paula leaving, but she's not gone, so we still have her as a planning consultant, and we'll still use her for some continuity and planning projects, so she's not going anywhere. Still sticking around a little bit, so, but excited to have the new planner in here, get started to work on some of these projects, so, and some of the text amendments and the things we talk about, I think it'll be good to have her in here, so. Excited for that. May 27th is our special plan commission meeting, because we have some pretty full schedules here, as you guys will see, and that one's full too, so we have 4 items on that. The 2 Starbucks ones we already kind of worked through with Equity. Union Bar and Grill is looking to add an outdoor patio, and they need a parking variance. And then Pete's Fresh Market is on that one as well. So just to forewarn you guys, it'll be another relatively longer meeting. Not our preference, but this is a busy time of year, and it's good to see good to see people coming forward, redeveloping sites and building new here in Tinley. So that's all I have.
Okay. We'll move on to receiving comments from the public. Is there anybody from the public wishing to comment? Seeing none, we will move on to adjourn tonight's Plan Commission meeting. May I have a motion to close the Plan Commission meeting?
So moved.
I second.
Okay, motion made by Commissioner Vick, seconded by Commissioner Lasciuto. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. The Plan Commission meeting is over at 9:07 PM. Thanks, everybody.